Greetings from the Long Island Sound podcast. Welcome to the show. Please rate, review, and comment on the show, and call our listener line and leave a message for our guests. Dial 631-800-3579. All right, enjoy the show.
Thanks for joining us for the Long Island Sound podcast. Each week we explore new music and dive deeper with the artists and their stories behind the music. Please subscribe and rate and review us wherever you stream this podcast. Here's your host, Steve Yusko.
You know, Gibson makes some really fine guitars, but when it comes to bluegrass music, there's nothing like the Gibson Brothers. Hey, I had a blast interviewing both Eric and Leigh. They're well respected in the bluegrass community, and we get to learn their backstory and some other really interesting stuff. So let's have a listen to their song, What a Difference a Day Makes.
What a difference a day makes. How could the whole thing fall apart? You were my pride and joy, and now you left me in the dark. Goodbye happiness, I never thought I'd born to break. Yesterday you loved me, oh what a difference a day makes. 24 hours had the power to make me blue. Turn the world so wrong that I can't go on no matter what I do. I wanna fall real deep in a dream and sleep where there ain't no truth, and pretend today is yesterday and I still had you. What a difference a day makes. How could the whole thing fall apart? You were my pride and joy, and now you left me in the dark. Goodbye happiness, I never thought I'd born to break. Yesterday you loved me, oh what a difference a day makes. Things weren't fine, I'd have done my best. I'd have walked the line and marched right in time past any test. You say I'll be fine, just give it time, that's what I need. Now every tomorrow just full of sorrows, all I see. What a difference a day makes. How could the whole thing fall apart? You were my pride and joy, and now you left me in the dark. Goodbye happiness, I never thought I'd born to break. Yesterday you loved me, oh what a difference a day makes. Goodbye happiness, I never thought I'd born to break. Yesterday you loved me, oh what a difference a day makes. Oh what a difference a day makes.
The Gibson Brothers have achieved a level of success doing things their own way. All they want to do is write, sing, and perform on stage. Their peers see them as superb entertainers, and they have been justified by a famed crop of producers. I'm so happy to welcome Eric and Leigh Gibson to the Long Island Sound podcast. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. So that was Leigh who said thank you, and I got a head nod from Eric. So
thank you. I didn't want to talk at the same time. I'm trying not to interrupt you.
Oh, it's all right. It's okay. Hey, great to have you guys. So you're in the bluegrass and the catch-all Americana genre. I started listening to your music. You got a new album coming out, but it may already be out. My apologies. But let's talk about. I'm so interested in families, wives and husbands and brothers who play music together. Like, when did it all start for you guys as far as picking up instruments and saying, hey, we can do this? And whoever wants to go first, you can pick and choose.
We'll let Eric go. Eric, you go ahead.
Well, we grew up on a dairy farm in northern New York, about 2 miles from the Canadian border. And my father and mother both loved music. though neither of them played. And my dad, there were always instruments in the house, he'd order a banjo or pick up a fiddle at an auction or order a guitar. But nobody played. And I think he always hoped that somebody would. And then when we were 12 and 11, there was a guy named Eric O'Hara who now plays music with us a lot, all these years later, who was giving lessons at Dick's Country Store, about 7 miles from the farm, a music store. And we came home from school one afternoon, and Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, and he said, I want one of you to learn the banjo, one of you to learn the guitar. I want you to try. We're starting lessons next week. So we already had the instruments there. So I chose the banjo, and Leigh chose the guitar, and that's how it started.
Wow, interesting. So what's the age difference between the two of you guys?
11 months.
Yeah, you know what? That's just like my brother and I. So you got the built-in competition, and there was no right of refusal, I guess, in doing it. So was there competition between you in learning the instruments? I'm curious about that.
I don't think at that time we had any competition. There's always, I guess, sort of, a benign kind of competition with everything, but we didn't, I never felt that in music at all. Like I got to get better than him or anything like that.
Right, right.
Well, I would think he's getting pretty good. I better keep practicing. I think there was that. I don't want him to leave me in the dust. I felt that way. I just wanted to be good, and he was getting good. I want to get good at it.
All right, that's kind of cool. So at what point, I think it's great, especially when you're in adolescence, where you grab an instrument and you start woodshedding it. You got the energy, you got the dedication, and you kind of get that hook. For me, it was different. It started later in life, and it was just like I took up the guitar. It was like too damn hard for me. I got past the 3 chords, and I was like, I sat the guitar down for a while until I was able to get on YouTube and guitar tabs and stuff like that. Because to me, it's more of a visual thing. If somebody could show me it, I could do it. And then later in life, I took lessons because I felt very ignorant about the notes on the neck and that sort of thing. When did you go from playing the instrument to start writing the songs? I'm curious about that.
It took a little while for that to happen. I was 12 and Leigh was 11 when we first started playing, and I think I was 15 when I tried writing a song for the first time. I don't know how old you were, Leigh, but I didn't write anything that was worth keeping for several years.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't think you recognize, you mimic. In your writing. I think we're trying to, you're writing somebody else's song all the time in a poorer version of it, initially. But I think I was 18 to answer your question, Eric. I think I was closer to 18 before I even tried to write a song.
Now, was it always like in the country vein, or like what were your influences early on?
Yeah, for me it was, it was country music and bluegrass music. I was probably pretty narrow. I was very narrow-minded early on, and that lasted for quite a while.
I remember you would chastise me for some of the stuff I was listening to a little bit.
Yeah, like Leigh would bring something in when we got out on the road. If the guys were bringing in something that wasn't bluegrass or hardcore country, I'd kind of, I didn't like it. It wasn't who I wanted to be.
Good.
And my feeling was, we should be listening to Merle Haggard and Flatt and Scruggs, and that, that's who I want to be.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking. And but as I got older, my horizons expanded, and I've listened to more stuff. I listen to a lot of different stuff now.
Yeah, what I found interesting. So I used to travel in Canada, and you guys are really close to the Canadian border. And when I first traveled, this is going back 30 years, I was really kind of surprised about the country music influence throughout Canada itself, that really kind of broadened out from there. And that had to come over the border to you guys too, I would assume. More of, I don't know, a home field type of music, would you say?
Yeah, the fiddle was a big instrument in
Okay.
Canada, and it's a big instrument in Appalachian music as well. So it kind of fit. We were trying to play bluegrass, and we didn't go south to find people to play with. We turned northward initially because it was somehow easier to play Canada at a fiddle contest to run into people. And there were a few people that have a banjo and stuff. They didn't really play what we would consider bluegrass, but they had the instruments and were trying, and there were fiddles, so there were just enough people there that knew old country music, and it would lead you to a jam session on a Tuesday night in a house someplace in Quebec. That they'd say every second Tuesday they do this, and so we'd show up as mom would drive us over there. We're too young to drive, and go in and start playing and singing with these folks. And they didn't speak a lot of English, but they sang in English, and so we just had a love of music, and I would say, Eric, that's correct, right? Yeah. That's kind of the first.
And I would say
if we were doing
CBC was an influence. We didn't have many channels, but we had the what is that, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC.
Right.
But the Tommy Hunter show had country music every Friday night, and they'd have American country people come up, but also really good Canadian country artists on there. And then we'd see people like Gordon Lightfoot on CBC, Ian Tyson, so many great songwriters from Canada. Stan Rogers, I think maybe we saw there the first time.
Before we came along, you'd already had sort of the exodus, like Stephen Stills, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young. They were already stars, by the time we were aware of what music even was. And there's an interesting thing in Canada. At least they used to have to. I think it was 2/3 of the material they played on their broadcasts had to be Canadian content, meaning the writer or the singer had to be Canadian. So you heard a lot of their artists. They weren't playing just American stuff because it was more popular, But it was a very interesting place to grow up, and the limit of, we don't have the exposure obviously kids have today, but it's almost like where we grew up, Eric, we're maybe 10 or 15 years behind where I live now, or say Long Island, you're 20 years behind technology or the sort of exposure to different genres or anything, cultures. So
we're kind of like Napoleon Dynamite a little bit,
Feeding the llamas.
Kip and
feeding the llamas.
Kip and Napoleon.
Well,
we were isolated.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I actually look at that as a benefit. And especially when you said you go to Quebec, Quebec City is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, I think. Very European. And bridging that gap with music, breaking over the language barriers is pretty interesting, So even though you might feel isolated, I think you had a really unique exposure, one, to cross the border into another culture and sing with people, which I think is fantastic. And the other thing I picked up on, and I did business in Canada, in particularly Montreal, and I remember they were pointing out, the difference between the French and the English, that the French words on a sign had to have a larger font. So there was that, hey, we want to, I look at it this way, hey, we want to retain our culture and retain our identity. So you saying that on CBC they'd had to have Canadian musicians and artists, I could see why. It makes sense,
What do you think about how much of their population, or what a percentage of their population lives within 50 miles of the U.S. border? You could be overwhelmed without doing something.
Absolutely.
Like that. So, the big centers are, Toronto's not far from Buffalo. Windsor's right there next to Detroit, So I think it was a good idea.
Yep.
Then.
So let me ask you, so now, just so I can get a timeline. So you're in teens and you woodshit your craft. You're writing a song here or there. You're traveling across the border. Mom's driving to drop you off in a foreign country. Very interesting. I'm sure my mom wanted to do that a few times for me. But when did you hit the road and say, we want to be musicians? We want to. And was there a big break? Because I assume it was a family business with the dairy farm for you to go out and do this.
It happened gradually. Leigh and I had no idea that we'd one day be trying to do it for a living. I became a teacher. Leigh was thinking about getting into law. But we just we started a band, and we started playing mostly the New England festival circuit. And we started getting pretty popular in that circuit. They treated us great. And each year it felt like we were getting further away from home,
Okay.
to the point where I was in California during finals week. I'm thinking I need to make a decision here. I mean, if I'm a good teacher, I should be in my classroom administering this final, and I'm in California playing a Bluegrass festival. And by that point, I was 28, I think, and Leigh was 27, right around there, 27 or 26. We were right in that range, and decided to get a year's leave of absence from teaching.
Wow.
And we went for it. We said, this is what we're going to do. And pretty much that's what we've done. But it's, it took a while. I don't know that there's ever been that huge break. It happened. What do you think, Leigh? Have we ever had a huge break that?
Like success by 1,000 cuts. Like everyone says, what was the break? What was this? And I've never recognized one. It's always been, there are nice surprises along the way, but they don't, you can't let that account for all of the success that you have, or it's a million little things that happen along the way. One person hears you here, and they have some influence and some, and it just kind of goes like that. We never had a record put out, and it, when we were younger, and we were allotted and everything just happened, so because it was such I don't want to say a struggle. It was such an effort to climb up that hill coming from where we were coming, and without any blueprint. We're not coming out of anybody else's band. We just started this thing, and we're trying to figure this all out. I feel like, because it was such a slow climb, we were prepared for when things don't always go your way in your career, which will happen. There's ups and downs, but I'm sometimes glad that I wasn't that act that just jumped on the scene and everything was great and easy, because it wouldn't prepare you for downtimes.
What I find interesting too is when you use the analogy of climbing the hill or the mountain, in your career. And I always was mistaken in the people that I've interviewed. And there's 1,000 stories of people who've, what I'd say, reached the crossroads. They took a big shot, and now, hey, you know what? I'm starving. I got to, go to plan B. I still love music, but I just can't do this. And it's a sad time, but it's a tough decision. And if you could blend the two, still do what you love in music, and yet, still teach and these other things, you're still climbing the mountain. You haven't, headed for the beach.
Yeah, sure. No, if you can do that, I mean, I don't have any disrespect for anybody who walks away from it. That's everybody's own personal decision, there's a lot more talented people than me that have hung it up, over the course of music history. And there's no shame in that either. It's just not what I've decided to do.
Hey, let me switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the song that our audience heard, What a Difference, and tell us a little bit about that, about the new album that it's on, and then we'll jump to a couple other things.
Sure. What a difference a day make. I wrote that a few years ago. Just started it. The melody came to me while we were backstage at a Bluegrass festival, and just started, one of those things that sort of just hits you, and you start humming it in your head, and didn't have any lyrics to go with it, and went home, and it didn't take a tremendous amount of time to write. It's just kind of a fun song, and I just kind of heard, when I was writing it, I sort of heard Del McCurry in my head a little bit when I was writing it, and but we recorded it, so it sounds more like me.
Nice.
I guess. But it's fun. I mean, it's kind of a high energy song, and it's not really complicated, and doesn't doesn't solve the world's problems, but makes people smile a bit. So that's
hey, that brings healing to the world too. If you can bring a smile to my face in a song, it's going to make my day a little bit better. So I got a question. From that time you wrote that song, has anything changed with how you approach writing music? Are you purposeful to say, hey, we're going to sit down and bang out a song? Or is it really as the muse hits you and over the course of time? Or is it a mix of both? It may be different for the both of you. I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, he's asked, you wrote that song. So, I mean,
yeah, I mean, I like songwriting with groups of people too, or other people. I enjoy that. And I tend not to be quite as slow when I'm writing with other people. When I write with myself, by myself, typically, it takes me a long time to finish things up. I don't know that I'm really critical. I'm trying to be perfect. I don't know. But if I sit and write with Eric and someone else, it usually happens rather fast. And I really like the results too. We don't typically go in. We've tried to go in with an idea that you've started, a concept or beginnings of a song. And I typically always walk away disappointed because it becomes something else than you thought it was when you walked in there. And to be fair, that's the purpose of collaboration, is to make something that's a piece of everybody. So now we kind of go in with a blank slate and just we'll be talking and something will come up and we'll write around that.
Nice. So let me ask you this. You went the festival route. You worked the Northeast, I assumed. How did you get to Nashville and how'd you start making those connections? How did that happen?
How did we get to Nashville?
Well, that was kind of like it was sort of a fairy tale. Where we come from, Nashville's Nashville, it's like a far off place that nobody goes to. Yeah, it's
more like the Wizard of Oz these days for sure.
Then I found out you could call up this guy that had this place in town and try to book a gig. So we did. Because we had a festival in Mississippi and one in Texas. And I was like, well, let's try to play in Nashville. I think that was the first time, wasn't it?
It was.
Because I remember we had a guy named Roy Hurd, who had a songwriting deal with Warner Chappell, or maybe it was Sony by that time. But he wrote for several years down there on staff. And he's from the North Country of New York, like we are. And we said, well, we got to Nashville and we're in a Days Inn, all sharing one room. There's four of us. They were like, well, we all called him Poncho. Let's call Poncho and let him know we're in town. So we just called up. This is before cell phones, of course. Said, hey, Roy, we're in Nashville. We're at the Days Inn. Yeah, we left the message. We're in Nashville. We're at the Days Inn. Come see us. And under Gibson. So he shows up finally. You guys do know there's like 20 Days in Nashville. We're such hillbillies.
We didn't know that we didn't know that we didn't know. No.
Played that gig. We played that gig at a place called the Station Inn, which is still there and is one of the best music spots in Nashville. Played the Station Inn, and it wasn't full, but I remember it was during the NAMM week, so there's probably more people than we actually deserved based on our name. And a guy comes up when I'm putting our stuff away, and he said, your playing reminds me a lot of Clarence White. And I'm thinking, well, this guy, he probably knows Doc Watson. He knows the name Clarence White. But it turns out it was Gene Parsons of the Byrds. He was in town. And so you talk about how do you meet people? That's how you meet people. You go play a gig someplace, and I couldn't believe it. It was really cool.
Leigh, you know what I remember about that? He said, now, where are you from?
What?
He said, where are you from? We said, New York. And he goes, well, you kind of ruined it right there, but I still like it.
That's right. Yeah. You got to be purposeful and say, no, not New York City. the nice part of New York.
Yeah. We're from Canada.
That's right. Hey.
Almost Canada.
Yeah. Oh, man. And I tell you, what's so interesting is those small circumstances that lead, as you reflect back on your career, it's like that led to this, led to that, and so on and so forth. I mean, I was going through your guys' bio and I'm like, this is like the who's who of the music industry. You guys really have touched and collaborated with a lot of big names out there. It's pretty impressive for two guys from upstate New York.
It wasn't that long after that we ended up in Nashville again, playing the Station Inn, and Tom T. Hall came to the gig. And the Tom T. Hall, like holy moly. And we get home and for some recently we were going back to Nashville again, and it was advertised, and I got a call from Miss Dixie Hall, Tom T's wife, inviting us. We see you're coming to Nashville. Would you come stay with us? How did that happen? Like our Nashville
in our mansion. It was all
Wow.
Annie Bella's place was beautiful.
Just like that.
And we had buddies in Nashville that we were telling where we were staying, and they couldn't believe it. They're like, "What?" and we had writers in the round with. I'm not lying, right? Like, I am remembering the Tom T and you and me and Chris Jones.
Yeah, like Chris Jones and Terry Hurd. Yeah, we were picking up a banjo from a friend who just passed, a guy named Ron Petranco. He was a real nice guy out of Montreal and a good photographer, but he bought a banjo from Sonny Osborne of the Osborne Brothers, and he said, "Will you pick it up for me? I've arranged it. You know, if you can go pick it up, meet him at the Opry and pick up my banjo that he's buying." Okay. So we go, and we're on the guest list to get in the back to go in the Opry.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, sure.
Wow. You know? And our friend Rob McCurry's wife, Lisa, was there, I remember, at the Opry that night. And Sonny has us into his dressing room and starts saying, "Well, where are y'all from?" And, "Oh, how do you know Ron?" And being very cordial and very nice. "Where are you staying?" And we dropped Tom T. Hall's house. What? Like, seriously?
You must be something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So he's like, I remember Lisa tells me, he said, "All right," he acted like he'd heard of us, like he liked us, you know, like, "You guys are really good." And then Lisa said, Sonny said to me when you guys weren't around, said, "Are they worth the shit?"
Somebody must have said yes.
Yeah, it was funny.
It's just amazing the connections that you can make. And you know what? The fact that you're open to it. Yeah, I'll pick up the banjo. Why not? Sure. You know, imagine if you said no.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, get yourself out there. It's you know, it's getting out there.
Sometimes,
so that's a lot of it.
Like as you're going through a lot of this, things are going by so fast that maybe sometimes you don't stop to appreciate what just happened, and you don't even think about it till later, and then you think about what we just talked about, and maybe people listening are thinking we're lying, you know, and I wonder, did it really happen? No, it was there. Leigh can tell you it happened. There's so many things.
We were witnessing a lot. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was early on. We're playing the station and stuff, and one of the guys that was hanging around was a guy named Dirks Bentley. Just happened to be working on a deal, you know, and nice guy. Just don't know who you're going to run into ever, and who they're going to, you know, when we meet them, you don't know what they're about, and you know they could be at the lowest depths of their career, and suddenly they're so high that you can't believe how famous they got.
I tell you, I had this guy on my program, a guy named Charlie Cullis. Okay. And he's from Queens. If you listen to his music, he sounds like a 30-year-old guy, country guy, singing. His song was, "Let's Bring This Party Back to My Hotel Room." Right. And I'm listening to this guy and I'm like, holy mackerel, this guy can't be from Queens. Sure enough. And, you know, he did songwriting in the round with all these people. He was on American Bandstand. And the one thing I learned from Charlie, and the takeaway I got, is don't say no. You got to be open to so many things, because you never know where that yes is going to lead you to somebody else. And that's what it sounds like for you guys. I mean, you got the talent too. So, you know.
I hear some amazing stories about the no's that people say. Like our buddy worked for, the guy, I just went blank. Ben Surratt, the work that he worked for Ray Stevens.
Oh,
you
sure.
know, and he the stuff that Ray said no to in his career. He said didn't want to be involved in Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head for Sundance Kid. And the other one was he was supposed to be the guy in The Big Lebowski instead of Jose Feliciano. You know, where they're at the show. You know, he said how was I to know what those things were going to be so big? You know, but he said no. So like you say, you got to be open to things that even if you're not certain.
Exactly. Hey, let's do this, guys. Let's just take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to explore. I'm really interested in your thoughts on the Nashville of yesteryear and how Nashville is today. I'm interested on your take on that. So hang with us, everybody. We'll be right back with the Gibson Brothers. At the Long Island Sound, we're much more than a podcast. We're building a community. Please go to gigdestiny.com, check out all our social media links, subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Please comment, call the listener line, tell us what you think, what questions we should ask, who we should have on the show. And most of all, we thank you for your generous support. And remember, support the artists who are guests on the show. Now back to the podcast. Hey everybody, we are back with Eric and Leigh Gibson. Gibson's your real name. It's not a stage name, right?
No, it's our real name.
That's real name. Okay. It'd be a great stage name too. We were talking about Nashville, but before we get into that, I just want to tell the audience that everyone we talk about, I'm going to have some information in the chapter marks. So if something strikes your fancy, you could look to that when you're not driving and listening to the podcast and get more information. Also, you'll have the links to the Gibson Brothers music on Spotify as well as their website. Got a lot of great stuff and a couple of nice videos. So we were talking about Nashville. I'm just curious about the Nashville when you guys first got there and the Nashville of today. What has changed for better or for worse? Okay, that's a loaded question. Anybody can take it.
Well, I mean, it. When we first went to Nashville, it almost felt like you could always find where you were in town because you could see the Bell South Tower. That makes a lot of sense. I'm a directional kind of guy, but they've done so much development and so many high rises that I never know where I am in town anymore, like naturally, you know. But it used to seem to be like music was maybe it's because we were naive and young, but music was a huge focus of that town. But and particularly the music tourism, but it doesn't seem so much that way as it used to. Does that seem like your take on it as well, Eric? I mean,
Well,
it seems it has to do with party more than it does the music.
I don't know if we changed a lot or if it changed a lot or both. But there's just so many more people there now. I mean, it's you really have to be strategic in getting from point A to point B. And the traffic's just horrible. I still love going to Nashville, but it's changed a whole lot. And we're not there enough. We're not experts on Nashville by any means. We're not there every week. We get there a few times a year now, and I always look forward to being there, and I always have a good time there and feel like we make inroads while we're there. But it's a different town. It's different. It's way different than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost. I went there last year as a non-musician, and it became very much like Disneyland to a certain extent. A lot of bridesmaids running around, and it's a busy, busy town. In fact, we went with a bunch of other couples, and we had a couples go like a month before to scout things out for us because we wanted to go to certain places. And I like offbeat places, not on a main strip, not a tourist trap, that sort of thing. We went to this place, Martin's Barbecue. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard.
Yeah, it looks like a little takeout place in the front, and the thing opens up to this just beautiful bar with great music, and that was a hoot. We had a really good time doing that. So what are you guys doing now? As far as let me backtrack. Take that back. How did COVID and quarantine affect you with music writing and not being able to play and how'd you handle it? What'd you do?
Eric was a lot more productive than I was. I didn't really write much during the whole pandemic. I've got to admit, wrote a few things, but everything came out sour and negative. Eric took the horns and wrote a lot of stuff with other writers as well. Wrote good stuff,
Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. So he was more productive in that front. It was. I think I've found that for me, being around other musicians, I get inspired by them. Like a lot of the stuff I've written that I've really liked over the last few years. It'll be at a music camp or something where you're teaching with other people for a week, and you just get very musical. And perhaps in my everyday life with everything else going on, just our own touring stuff, I don't feel that way. And it doesn't mean that the guys I tour with aren't musical. I have a lot of other responsibilities when I'm doing that, other than just sitting in the same place for a week,
right?
And I have 3 hours of hotel time in the morning when I first wake up that I'm not interrupted, and I just feel like, a lot of stuff comes out. So, COVID stunk, man. I hated it.
Yeah, it's like the world stopped for 2 years. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's, like you said, there's been both sides of it. There are people very prolific with their creativity.
Yeah.
And
inspired. Yeah, I was kind of early on in COVID being mopey, like, what am I going to do? And my wife said, treat this time off as a job. Treat your writing like a job. Get up in the morning and write. Treat that like your job. This is your job now. And so I took that to heart. I'm like, what else am I going to do? I raised chickens, we kept bees, and I wrote songs. And wrote songs with my son. My son is in his mid-20s and loves music so much that it's inspiring to me. And he always wants to write, Dad. And so it's hard to say no to your kid. Like there have been times when he'd say, Dad, want to write one? And I don't feel like it. And he'd say, what, have you lost your fire?
Oh man,
I've said that to him before. He turned it on me,
of course.
And what are you going to do when somebody says, "Have you lost your fire?" You get your guitar, and you start trying to write a song. And they're not all going to be home runs, but you write enough of them, once in a while, you're going to bang out a good one.
Yeah, it's almost like exercising. Sometimes we need that little coach who's going to say, "Yeah, get your ass off the couch and let's do something."
Yes.
Yeah, we can feed the chickens later. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's talk about the second song that you brought, "I Go Driving." Tell me a little bit about that, and we'll let the audience get a listen to it.
Well, Leigh talked about Leigh likes to write in the morning, and I do too. My mind seems to be sharper in the morning. But this is one of the only songs I've ever written at night, and it was a COVID song. It was feeling stir crazy, wanting to get out of the house, and I went for a ride, and I drove on the back roads of home. We grew up 15 miles away, and I just was driving and listening to old country music and just trying to pretend that things were good again. And that song started coming, and I came through the kitchen door, and my wife started talking to me. I said, I gotta go upstairs. I gotta write. I gotta get this down. That's how that song happened.
Wow. Excellent. All right. Let's take a listen to "I Go Driving," and we'll be right back after the song. Check it out, everybody.
When I go driving down the roads I know by heart, when I go driving, I feel better in the dark. In the light it hurts too much to see what isn't there today. In the dark I can pretend that I'm okay. As I'm riding, I sing songs I know by heart. As I'm riding, I love every single part of good old boys like me, blue eyes crying in the rain. Is it wrong that I find pleasure in the pain? See, I'm traveling back in time to a land of make-believe, where the farms are going strong and my father's still with me, where the silos in the shadows and the barns are full of feed, where there's hope in farmers' eyes and folks who know their needs. When I go driving, as I'm dreaming, drifting down those country lanes. Yes, I'm dreaming, thinking things can be the same. I'm looking at the I'm trying not to stare, reaching for a life that isn't there. You see, I'm traveling back in time to a land of make-believe, where the farms are growing strong and my father's still with me, where the silos in the shadows and the barns are full of feed, where there's hope in farmers' eyes and folks who know their needs. When I go driving, when I go driving, when I go driving.
That was a really great song. You know what I find interesting, Eric and Leigh, is a lot of the artists that I talk to when it comes to writing music, a lot of them, whether it's on a tour bus or what have you, when they've got that road time, the muse kind of gets to them, you know, where they're kind of in that bubble and go driving. So I found it interesting in the lead into the song. You said you just went for a drive and you came back and told your wife, hey, I got to write this down. You know, I think that's great. It's really cool. What I'm really interested to, I was reading your guys' bio, and I tell you, everybody listening to this, by the way, go to the chapter marks. You'll see all the people we're talking about. And let me tell you, the people you guys worked with are like the who's who of the music business. And I was just like, oh my God, I didn't realize these guys were as famous as they are, you know? But I'm interested on how a lot of these connections came about, how you feel that, you know, how did that benefit you and helped form your music and what you deliver?
I mean, early on, you know, once we got going, it just felt that our heroes, some of our heroes were drawn to us. You know, it's like I think maybe
Wow.
they recognized that in our music that they could hear how much we love them, you know, through our music, that we were inspired by them. And like Ricky Skaggs coming up to us after a show telling us how much he liked our singing and wanted to do a record with us. So we made a record with him in the early 2000s that, well, it's never come out, but we still did it. And we
Sure.
and everybody in Bluegrass knew we were doing it. And I think that put a light on us a little bit and showed people that, well, if Skaggs thinks they're good, they must be pretty good. You know, these guys know Tom T. Hall. Tom T. Hall did a recitation on one of their albums. They know Tom T. Hall, and it just grows. It grows from there, and you're working hard. You're getting better as a band. You're getting better as singers and writers, and you're rubbing elbows with your heroes, and you know, I think that's how, you know, that happens. First record we made in Nashville, we met Dave Ferguson, and he wasn't. I mean, he's a legend now, but back then he was the second engineer at the. What's that?
I said we had to be told his credibility back then because we didn't know, you know,
Right.
but now everybody now knows.
Now he's one of the hottest producers in Nashville, and 18 years later he remembered us and wanted to do a record. And then when we did the record in 2018, it was supposed to be with Dave Ferguson, and we get a call from our manager, and he says, Dave's buddy Dan Arbach of the Black Keys wants to be involved. Is that okay? So I said, yeah, that's okay. Yeah. We'll write that.
Leigh, what do you think? Is that okay, Leigh? Oh, yeah, that's okay.
I actually said I'll have to run it by Eric.
Yeah, Leigh did. He called me up. I said, "What? Why are you asking me?" Like, yeah, he called you first, right?
You know, you can't be the easy girl in the party all the time. Sometimes you got to pull back. You know, you got to pull.
No.
You think about, I think about this like when we were working with Ricky. Ricky's then manager Ricky had hired his then manager's brother-in-law to set up his studio and he was a young guy, and set up the board, all the off-board stuff, and he was the studio manager, and he engineered a lot of stuff. And Eric and I would go in there on days that they didn't have us tracking and go make like song demos with this guy, and we had a great time. And you go ahead a dozen years or 15 years, and he and his brother, his name's Alex Anders, and his brother's named Adam. They wind up doing a little show called Glee, where they do all the music production and all the recording for it, and they do all kinds of stuff like that in Hollywood, and you never know who you're going to meet, and it hasn't put us on ABC television or anything like that, but it's a great story. There's another one that these sort of happenstance meetings of professionals in the music industry, and they go on to big things.
Well, there's an old saying, the all boats rise with the rising tide, and the fact that you get that, Ricky Skaggs giving you credibility, but just saying, hey, he worked with you, whether the album gets produced or not, boom, your credibility goes up and people start to talk about you. And there's and I'm just going to make an observation. You two guys are really nice guys. And that comes through. And I would assume that, and people are people, right? And you get to meet them and you're talking like they're your neighbor down the block. That to me carries a lot of weight of they're not divas. They're not so full of themselves. They're regular guys with talent. I mean, I'm sure if you've asked people, what attracted you to us or whatever, they're going to say, yeah, you guys know what you're doing. You're good. And we like you. That's a factor. Absolutely. It's got to play into it, I would think,
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Very kind of you.
I could be totally wrong, of course, but
yeah, you probably are.
You haven't known us that long, so
yeah, I know, but I'll find out. I have a way. So you have these connections, and it seems like one gets introduced to another. Tell me about the album that you got coming out in January. Were all the songs written around the same time? How did things come about? And who picked the title, by the way?
Who did the title?
I think you did.
Did I? Well, it makes sense for my ego. All the songs weren't written around the same time. We had this thing where we wanted to do a record, and we're friends with, became friends with another hero, a guy named Jerry Douglas, who's one of the world's best guitar players, plays resophonic guitar, and he's on all the records we always liked growing up and since, makes great records, and he decided he would work with us. So Jerry just told us to send him everything we'd written that we hadn't recorded. So we did.
Wow.
A lot of stuff that hadn't made other records due to content parallels, something, it's like another song, or at least we saw it that way.
Right.
Or it was just, we didn't think we could tackle it musically the way we wanted to at the time. And half of the record was made the first week of the pandemic, like March 16th or 17th through 20th. And then we had to stop. And we came back and finished recording in February of 21.
So did you do, let me interrupt you. Did you do it in person, or was it all remote at that point, or then you switched to remote?
No, we were in person.
Okay.
We just, so little was known about what was going on.
Right, I remember. Yeah.
We had gigs canceled, but we had that studio time scheduled for months. And everybody was thinking, things just shut down for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And Jerry's like, make a little bubble, and we'll, we'll just be honest with each other. We're just going to stay in this little circle of people, which is what we did. But it just felt wrong after a while being there, that it was time to get home. And so we went back in February of 21 and finished the recording.
What studio?
We started it. We've done several projects at this place called the Sound Emporium. It has a couple of rooms. Did a lot of records there in the early 2000s. And then this is the first time we'd really been back there, Eric, since then, right?
Yeah.
And we did that first half there with an engineer named Shawnee Gandhi, Shawnee's isn't she from like Ithaca or something? Or
she went to Ithaca College.
So.
She's from New Zealand or something, isn't she?
Oh yeah, she's from New Zealand. That's
easy to confuse. Yes, that New Zealand accent.
I went to Ithaca.
She was awesome, man. name dropper. She's a wicked engineer. We did the second half at, is it Mountainside Studios, name of Bill's place? Bill Horndale. Yeah. And it's Bill's last project. Bill passed away, sadly, last year, or earlier this year. I think it's the last project that Bill probably mixed, and Bill did a lot of great things.
Wow.
So anyway, that was sort of the recording, timeline.
Nice. And it's called The Darkest Hour. Real upbeat.
It's just Darkest Hour, isn't it?
Yeah, we hope.
The Darkest Hour.
There's no just Darkest Hour.
Yeah, I guess so.
Very good.
Man, it's the title. It's the name of a song I wrote.
Gotcha. Hey, let's talk about the third song that is on the album, 1 minute of You. Tell me about that, and then we'll have a listen to it.
Well, that's one that I wrote after the pandemic started, or right at the beginning of it, maybe, because we didn't cut it in that first set of songs. But it's one I wrote about my daughter. I sort of recognized that when she was real young, she was very, very shy. And then she became such an active, upbeat, bubbly, happy, do everything kind of kid,
Right.
which I never would have, And so it's a song I wrote about her.
Nice. All right. Well, let's listen to 1 minute of You. We'll be right back after the song. Check it
Now,
out.
babe, I know there comes a day, but I don't want to give away 1 minute of you. I see your eyes so big and bright, giving everything all your might. You got your heart and all you do. And I know that wanting to won't stop time, but I wish it would. And I'd be on every little hill you climb if I only could. So when you're out there on your own, just know that you're not alone. My love you can't outgrow. I hope you realize you are the shiniest of the stars the sky will ever show. And I know that wanting to won't stop time, but I wish it would. And I'd be on every little hill you'll climb if I only could. Now, babe, I know there comes a day, but I don't want to give away 1 minute of
Hey, everybody. We are back with the Gibson Brothers. Really appreciate that song about your daughter. So tell me, guys, what do you got coming up in January to support the album?
Well, the record comes out on the 27th, and I think right close to that date, we started running of shows in New England, in the Northeast, and then we head down through the Carolinas. And I know we're working in Nashville, and dates keep changing. They can find something that works a little better than they'd had on hold. So they sort of are changing a little bit because we're a little ways out. It's mostly small theater and club stuff right now. But it's some of the rooms we haven't really played, so I'm kind of curious as to what to expect as well. But it'd be fun to play the songs.
What's your website, guys?
GibsonBrothers.com.
GibsonBrothers.com. No relation to the guitar manufacturer, right?
Well,
Oh, come on. Really? No. Yes? No?
he's from Orville Gibson's from Chateauguay, New York, which is where Eric is talking to you from practically right
7
now.
miles from where we grew up.
We're not descendants of his, but he's probably a distant cousin from.
I'm thinking Ancestry.com. I'm just saying. That's what I would do.
Well, actually, our uncle is a genealogy freak, and he's never been able to. He's not from the same line of Gibsons that we were in this country, so it would have to be something that predates leaving the British Isles.
Gotcha.
So, no money for the Eric and Leigh
Well,
tonight.
you just guys got to keep pumping it out there and putting out great music. That's all
But people
Let's put
around here
guitars
all
under
think
our
that
own
we
name.
were
Yeah, I know,
to,
right? Oh well.
to Orville, and
All right. So we'll keep it a mystery. You could be related. We'll keep it a mystery. How's that?
Oh, what was that story you were telling me that the Gibson Guitar Company got in some trouble with some imported Brazilian rosewood, and it was all over the papers?
Oh, I remember
They
that.
got seized by the whatever. Yeah. Well, Eric's father-in-law was having coffee at the local diner, and he heard some guys talking about, well, those Gibson boys certainly got themselves in some trouble now, didn't they?
yeah, my father-in-law says, "You better get your facts straight, buddy."
Kicking some ass in upstate New York. Nice.
Yeah.
I believe it. Hey, guys, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really want to get you back on the program. I think there's just so much more to discuss. I really enjoyed our time together. So,
anytime.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Best of luck with the album that's coming out in January. Everybody, keep your eyes peeled for the Gibson Brothers. Go to the chapter marks. You'll see all the dates of where they're playing. And, of course, go to geekdestiny.com. We'll put some information up there as well. All right. Till next time, be well, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment and visit us at geekdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace. Thanks so much for listening. Please rate, review, and comment on the show. We really love to hear from you. And call our listener line at 631-800-3579. Again, thanks so much. Be well.